Tari Eason's prospect case is something I find endlessly fascinating, especially his scoring and his slashing game, which is polarizing. On one hand, his raw athleticism, his power, his speed, his coordination is pretty immense for a guy who's legit 6'9" and 6'10" and able to round a defender on the baseline with his handle and rise up like this off of 1 foot for the reverse is pretty ridiculous. But for every single one of those plays, there's one or two plays like this where Tari's unable to separate with his handle or his stiffness and just kind of throws up a bad shot and isn't able to make a good decision or get a good result out of the play. So what gives? How can we project a player like this in the NBA? I think it's a complicated question and one that I'm going to attempt to answer today. The first thing that is important to look at, there are many things when talking about creation and driving at all, is what kind of tools your prospect has already that they can act on immediately and that they can amplify through improvement. And strength is going to be an immediate one for Tari. This spin move is mean as he just dislodges a pretty large defender without much trouble at all. This is a great display of power here and speed to power as well, getting a wide open shot. And we've seen a lot of like very strong players who maybe have some wiggle or burst limitations thrive off of this kind of spin move and strength based creation. Cade had similar problems with the wiggle in his handle and the lack of high end burst. But he was able to use his spin move and his shoulders and his leverage to create great shots. You can kind of see that the handle is kind of slow and looping, but he's able to wall off this defender and minimize the amount of dribbles he needs to get into his spot. You see there, 4 or 5 defenders converging here. And if Cade has to keep dribbling, he probably doesn't have the handling control at this stage in his career to kind of not turn the ball over or to keep his handle and continue surveying. So he's able to wall himself off. And I think this is going to be something Tari can rely on and improve on because the strength is so real and he has the coordination to make those quick turns as well. Again, like there are more kind of minute ways of creating with your strength. This bump hero is one of them where Tari is so strong and fast that he's going to be able to force a defender to choose a direction and commit, and then he can use that momentum against the defender. You see a guy like Keldon Johnson do this a lot, who I seem to have lost the clip. This one, where Keldon is able to use his strength as a slasher to just very easily discard this defender here and create a wide open look. You see he gets right into Darius Baisley's chest as well, uses his off arm to maybe push off a little bit and uses nice footwork to create a pretty wide open shot. So again, I think this is going to be something Tari can potentially rely on, especially in open space. I really like this play as a demonstration of like just how immense his strength is. And like Tari isn't like an evidently super ripped guy. Like he is well built, but I think he has a frame conducive to adding even more muscle. And this is Oscar Sheboy, one of the strongest guys in college basketball, just a monster of an athlete. And Tari is able to move him backwards pretty easily. Obviously, this play isn't great. He doesn't create much separation because Oscar can kind of sag here because Tari isn't the most imposing off dribble shooter yet. The handles don't really create any separation, but do watch him string together moves with his head up, which we'll get to later. And then the finish isn't maybe the smartest decision here. I like the inside hand craft, but again, his decision making can be rough. At times, really isn't looking for extra passes or resetting the offense. But like the main takeaway here is just how easily he's able to bump backwards. An extremely strong player, and that is impressive. And I think the second kind of important consideration to think about when thinking about creating is what role a player is playing and is going to be creating him. Like this is probably not something you're going to see a ton from Tari in the league. Like straight isolation to the team's like primary scorer. And, a lot of college players are like this and then shift into smaller roles. And like this play is more of like an NBA level example where Tari catches a dribble handoff and is able to not once but twice totally disregard this defender's chest bumps with his off-arm usage and with his own strength and ability to stay balanced while driving. And this, ends up actually getting. I believe this ends up, being a bucket. But point being, his ability to use his strength and his leverage and his speed to turn the corner and score is a much more realistic application of his tools than something like the previous couple plays where he's just kind of isolating 1v1. The second thing to consider is what happens when you just can't use strength. Either you're not in a position to, or you're just a player that you can't move. Then it's going to be coming to creating separation with your handle. And Tari is okay at this. I think you can see some good and some bad in a play like this, where he's able to kind of use his agility and change of direction. Like, he has really nice, feet, and he can change directions pretty well for a guy of his size. But the handle, even here, you can see is pretty loose. He's like staring down at the ball, and he kind of almost loses his handle here, even though he's still able to finish. And again, the handle is just generally pretty loose. Like, I like his usage of the little head fake here, like the little subtle little eye fake, super subtle, but it's enough to get this defender to bite a little bit. But he just isn't able to keep his dribble. He kind of almost slips here. Again, we see the spin move, but he's spinning straight into a defender and ends up making this. But I generally don't count this as a super positive play because there are much better decisions. But again, we see good and bad. We see the ability to change directions and to use some manipulations. And I see the big issue here as the process issue, where an isolation into kind of a tough shot might not be the best idea. But if you're tightening this handle, which I don't think it's that crazy to expect someone like Tari to be able to tighten his handle to the point where he can execute a simple between the legs dribble without fumbling the ball. That probably gets him an open layup here. He's probably able to round this defender and drive straight and get an open layup or a dunk. But because he has to lose the ball, take some extra dribbles to control it, he isn't able to separate as well. So kind of like a low-hanging fruit development point that you could potentially point to as something that Tari can use to improve as well. And I like a play like this where not much happens, but you can just see his ability to stop and start on a dime for a guy of his size. Like, it's nothing like insane, and when you compare it to someone like Jaden Ivey, but watch this: start, stop, start. Like, it is impressive that he's able to move this fluidly and kind of move with the ball this fluidly. And I think this is an important play for me in evaluating someone's creation. Even though it doesn't turn into anything, it's not a bucket or an assist or anything. It's something that shows me a tool that this player has and a tool that this player can use to improve their game, which is something that is important to look at when we're projecting handle and projecting creation. And again, if the handle can get tighter, if he can use this tool more often, then he can be a more enticing creator prospect. We see a lot of this, I think, when Tari is in transition. When he's in big space, when there's not a ton of defenders around, when he has lots of court to work with, he can really make some impressive handling moves. Like this behind the back into finish is very impressive for his size. Being able to change directions like this and score on his opponent. As we've seen, he struggles in small spaces, and in a bigger space like this, Tari's able to thrive. This is certainly not a unique issue. We see a player like Zion, and again, not a comparison of these guys as players, just happened to be the clips that I had available on my computer, where we see kind of a similar-ish situation, but this is a tighter space than Tari was working with because there's kind of three defenders around, and Zion loses his handle and isn't able to hold on to it. And also a guy like Tyrese Halliburton, who this problem was, again, more pronounced in college, but he has kind of second defender lurking here, and he isn't able to hold on during the spin move and loses the ball. And both have found their own creative ways to kind of improve that handle and to mitigate those issues in the league. And I think Tari definitely has the tools to do so in his own unique way when it comes to strength and agility and coordination and some of the change of direction ability he's already flashed. So the foundation for someone who can create off the ball is definitely there, I think. I just think he is mostly relegated at this point to pretty straight line creation. That is the criticism he's received, and I do agree with it. Again, you see a play like this where he attacks a closeout. You hope he can force a more enthused closeout here, as his shot is something that I could spend a whole other video talking about that I'm not going to. I think it's going to be okay. But even when he's not able to force a hard closeout, he has the speed to blow by someone. But again, the process isn't great. When he isn't able to get something at the rim, he really struggles in that intermediate area. And these are the more like really concerning plays for his projection to me, because it's not a question of improving the tightness of his handle or teaching you to do a move or two. It's processing the space that he sees in front of him, and learning what decisions to make. And that's only going to come with reps and time, and that's how you improve that. But I think there's often a ceiling on that for a lot of players, and especially an older one like Tari, who I believe is already 21. So I think you're going to see a lot more second side actions like we've seen, more closeout attacking, maybe secondary pick and rolls, transition cuts. But there are players who are really effective and can make a lot of scoring money off of that. I think of Miles Bridges as someone who has become a really impressive scorer, mostly on second side actions using his power and speed. And I think Tari can kind of maybe approximate something like that at his high end. These are the flashes where I love him using his strength and his deceleration tools to create in the mid-range. Again, just like the last play, he doesn't have a clear path to the rim, but instead of just barreling towards it, he's able to stop like this, use his off arm. I really like how he uses that left arm to kind of fight off and fend off this defender and create a little separation with the stop. Isn't able to make the mid-range as well, but I think this is a nice play for his potential mid-range growth and intermediate scoring growth, which is going to be another important development if he wants to hit a really high-end offensive outcome. So I didn't really make many conclusions in this video. This is mostly just kind of minute analysis, but I do think there is real creation upside with Tari as a guy who, off of a closeout or off of a tilted defense, can use his tools, and I think there's a lot of areas for improvement that aren't too far-fetched, as we've seen. So Tari is someone who I'm very interested to see where he goes and where he lands, because I think that's going to matter a lot. It seems like he's kind of slipping in the consensus mocks and stuff, which honestly might not be a bad thing for him, because those spots with other creators or offensive stars that you see lower in the draft generally could be better for him in the long run.